This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Chris Papa and Lisa Flicker.
Evan Holladay, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here. How are you?
Thank you for having me on, Chris and Lisa. I appreciate it. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, me too, man. Evan and I met in person at HF in Chicago. Sat down. I don't know if we ever met before that, but I remember seeing on you have a big social presence, and I remember seeing who is this guy? And it was great because Lisa and I pride ourselves on being, very social media savvy with LinkedIn and all that jazz. And I was like, he's crushing us. And I gotta meet this guy. And so, yeah, can you just tell us about Holladay Ventures, and we can then go into some other stuff.
Yeah, definitely. No, I appreciate that. Really, my wife and I started the company about 6.5 years ago with the goal and the intent of creating impactful, affordable housing. So not just building the housing, but figuring out ways that we can partner with nonprofits and service providers and provide wraparound services, and also think about not only building the housing, but making it intentionally designed to fit in with each community that we serve and making each development unique. And so kind of having a nonprofit mindset in our developments with a for-profit model, and have been able to scale that over the last 6 years with over 1,200 units right here in Nashville. And, I've been very lucky, fortunate that I figured out what I wanted to do early on in my career and just doubled down on it. And I love building stuff, and I love figuring out how to help people through that, and found my love and passion in affordable housing.
How did that become your passion? It's interesting. I was looking at your backgrounds, and when you look at your education, it looks like you studied economics, entrepreneurship. How did you kind of make the leap from that to real estate and in particular affordable housing?
Yeah, I actually started as pre-med, and then one science and one chemistry class later, and I was like, that is definitely not for me. And I quickly pivoted. I was like, you know what? I've heard good things about economics. Let me take one of those classes. And I loved it. I was like, this is how my brain already thinks. I was like, this is exactly this was lined up for me. So I went into economics major, but then I realized, I was like, what am I going to do with this? What kind of,
You'd be an
role?
economist.
Yeah, exactly. Work at the Economist. And so I at the same time, there was a student housing development announced on campus. I went to University of Louisville, and it was more of a commuter school. It was transitioning to a residential school. And this big student housing development, a whole city block, was announced, 355 beds, $55 million. And I was like, man, something like that is calling me in. I got to be a part of that. And I was telling people that. I was just telling everybody around me, I was like, that's really cool. I want to do something like that. And I told one of my mentors, and he's like, really? He's like, I know the developer. Would you like me to introduce you? And it didn't just happen through that one, introduction, but took basically me proving myself to that developer, and that basically bringing out 200 people out to his groundbreaking by getting my buddies to pass out flyers in return for pizza. And so that opened the door, me constantly calling that guy until he finally gave me an opportunity to help lease the building.
Huh.
And that opened the door for me to get into development. I really started out as a leasing agent, but I was one step closer to doing what he was doing. And it really part of kind of hit me where, I got to know the developer, I got to understand the plans of the building. And I was like, wait a second, the lobby on each floor does not have any windows. There's a wall right there. And I mentioned to the developer, I was like, it'd be great if there's some natural light. And 2 weeks later, I saw windows going in on that building. And I was like, oh my God, I can actually have an impact on this building. And it's a minor detail, but I think it'll have a massive impact on the experience. And it just shattered my glass. I was like, all right, I have to do development. And then at the same time, I volunteered for a nonprofit that did affordable housing for single parents, single mothers going back to get their college degree. It's called Family Scholar House. Amazing group, amazing impact and work. And that volunteering there, helping, mentor some of the kids in that program helped show me that I was like, whoa, you can have real impact through the built environment, through real estate. And I was like, all right, I want to help people and I want to build stuff that together is affordable housing. And from there, just dove all in and figured out every which way I could get my foot in the industry.
How did you even know about affordable housing? Like, I remember I used to think affordable housing was just people volunteering, right? I didn't know it was like a business, right? You could make money, you could support yourself, you could have a good life, living comfortably and all that jazz. How did you even know that was a thing?
I honestly, I fell into it a little bit. Like I knew I wanted to work for that developer, but this volunteer opportunity, like I didn't choose to volunteer for that group. I was part of a, freshman program that assigned us to volunteer to different groups. I just got assigned to Family Scholar House, and then I saw that and I realized I learned about what it was, and I learned about affordable housing, and I learned about the services and support and the better outcomes. And that's when I was hooked. And I was like, oh, I can do what this student housing developer is doing, but also do it in an impactful way.
So I just need to be a little bit nosy because my husband and I met by starting a business together. And you mentioned you and your wife do that. Did you meet because of the business, or did you start
No,
together?
but yeah, crazy story. My wife and I met from an online dating app. I was in Austin, Texas, looking for developments. I was just out of college working for another developer. She was working for a Spanish television network on their impact, basically their impact platform, and helping with education, different initiatives. And we had just be literally like, our circles crossed. We were within 3 miles of each other. She was in Miami and I was in Louisville. Somehow we were both in Austin at the same time. Ended up we long distance dated for a year plus, and she comes from a coaching and a life coaching and an impact empowerment background, and those were her passions. And so, really, when I started Holladay Ventures, she had her own coaching business. But I eventually was like, hey, I need help with the website. Hey, I need help with the branding. Hey, I need help with operation. And I was like, eventually, I was like, babe, I need you full time. Like, can you help? Can you join me in this? And she basically was the head of operations. She was my COO, kind of my backbone of the business for everything operations and marketing up until about a year and a half ago when we had our baby girl. Basically, as soon as we got pregnant, she was like, I want to go full time mom. And so we backed into how we could get there. And so we're now in great hands with having a great operations and marketing team. But she was really the impetus to help get us, the springboard to help really get us going quickly in this first 5, 6 years.
How did you get to Nashville? Did you pick that? Did you like say, I want to work in Nashville? I want to start doing development in Nashville? And like, how did you get your first deal?
Yeah. So back up a little bit. So right out of college, through our entrepreneurship program, I started a modular development company that worked on affordable housing and mixed income and sustainable housing. And we were trying to find partners. We were green. We knew nothing about development. We'd never done a development, but we were like, yeah, let's go out and do a modular development. And
Only
I
as
was
someone who's
trying.
never done development would do.
Yeah, right. And but what's crazy was through this entrepreneurship program, they forced us to get really good at your pitch, get your business plan together. Like through this class and the program, I was pitching to like the CEO of Walmart, the CEO of Churchill Downs, like all of these top CEOs of venture capitalists. Like, so it forced us to get really good about our business plan. We had a board of directors. We had the whole thing set up, and then we kept winning these competitions. We're like, wait a second, let's actually make this a business. And, and through that, I also realized I was like, wait a second, like as I got more into it, I was like, there's a whole lot here we do not know. Like we were very green. And so at that point, I was right out of college and I was like, I need to work for somebody who knows the ins and outs, who has proven success, and I can learn on the shoulder of them and their experience. And so I started applying for really any development opportunity I could find across the country. And I ended up finding an amazing opportunity right in my backyard in Louisville for an up and coming developer. They were, top 10 on the HF list. And I knew, but it was a small group. I was like employee number 13 when I was hired there, but they first weekend they threw me in the deep end and they said, "Hey, go find some 9% deals in Brownsville, Texas and McAllen, Texas." And I was like, "I don't know where that is, but I will figure this out and I will make it happen." And I was on a plane 6 days later talking to the city manager, talking to brokers, trying to figure it out. And that's really where I cut my teeth. I mean, I had just an amazing opportunity to be able to do that. And they're having trust and buy-in
Did
in
you find
me.
a deal in Brownsville?
I did not. I submitted 2 applications, neither of them hit, so we dropped the sites. But my first deal that I closed was, I got a 192 unit in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I basically submitted 2 home fund applications with 4% credits. And these are my first 2 home fund applications I ever submitted. Literally, there's a whole story about the application. I totally underestimated how long it was going to take me. And I had my whole family at Thanksgiving literally helping me submit, applicate, like put it all together, hole punch it. This was back when we had to like physically, mail in the 3-inch binders. And I was racing Black Friday to get it in for FedEx overnight for Monday. We ended up winning both the applications, and I got the letter like New Year's Eve, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this is the best New Year's Eve ever." But then we had to figure out how to, get them done. So that was the first deal I did was Baton Rouge and 192 units. I think it was 2016 or 2015 that we closed that one. And it really, over the span of 6 years there, I worked in Nashville. So getting back to your original question, why Nashville? I really found my sweet spot at that company in Louisiana and Tennessee. And so I was based in Louisville, but I was always on the road almost every week and just constantly, in the network, in the market, trying to figure out how I could add value and how I could be of service. And eventually came to a point where I had closed multiple deals in Nashville and I was always on the road. I was like, you know what? What if we live in Nashville? What if we move there? What if we're closer to our market? And so while I was still at that development company, I had the opportunity to move. So I was still working at the development company when I moved. And then about a year later, left and started Holladay Ventures, really with the mission of saying, how can we, the company I worked for was very much focused on creating as many units as possible. While I was there, we were #1 affordable developer 2 years in a row. And being part of that growth and part of that, building that was amazing experience. And I wouldn't have changed that for the world. But it also taught me a couple things, ways that I didn't want to do development or ways that I wanted to do it differently. And I really wanted to focus on how we could do each development in a unique manner, focused on sustainability, placemaking, and resident services. And that's really what we've been all about since starting Holladay Ventures in 19 and have found quite a bit of success doing that. Very thankful for amazing partners that have got us here and just excited for what's to come now, looking forward in future deals and future markets.
Well, Nashville's lucky to have you, man.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. It's such a fun city, amazing people, and such a need for affordable housing. It's not unlike any other market across the country, but there's such a big economic driver here. So many people want to live here. So many jobs are coming here. Oracle moves their headquarters here. It's just got a lot of momentum, but with that momentum comes the need for more housing.
So a lot of the people who listen are students or people who are thinking about getting into real estate. Is there any advice that you might give to somebody who's in college or in business school thinking about getting into affordable housing?
Yeah, I would say, I just recorded a video going into a little bit more detail of my like early stages and things that I learned along the way. And really I think it comes down to a couple of different things. I think it's like, you know, shoot your shot. If you see somebody that is doing what you find you have some kind of passion in, and also you don't have to have it all figured out day one. Like, within that journey that I mentioned earlier, like there's a lot, of course, a lot of pieces that we don't have time to go into. But like, for one example, like at some point I thought maybe I wanted to get into sustainable breweries. Like I wanted to start my own sustainable brewery. I was doing, home brews in college, like making my own beer, and I really loved it. But I tried it out and then I realized I was like, you know what? I think I'm more passionate about housing. So I think it's shoot your shot with people that are in the direction and further ahead of in the direction of where you want to go, either mentors or developers or operators or really any angle that you see interest in and passion in, shoot your shot, see how you can be of value first. Like that developer, he didn't just give me a job because I knew his friend. He made me add value by bringing people out to his groundbreaking. And then he still didn't give me a job right away. I had to like be persistent. And I think he saw that persistence in me. And that's why he's like, he's probably like, I didn't know, if this kid would be useful or not, but he seems to be really persistent. So let me give him a shot. And I think you combine that with like trying out different things and putting yourself out there. That's, I think, for me, and also take action before you really feel fully ready. I think those have all worked really well for me. And even though it feels scary in the moment, like there's so many times where like, I started a podcast and I was, literally asked the guy to be a guest on my podcast. I didn't even have a podcast. I just really wanted to talk to that guy. He was a venture capitalist. And but beforehand, it was just an idea in my head, and I had a kind of a nervous conversation with my wife, and I was like, "I really want to keep talking to this guy. Like, how do I keep talking?" And we're like, "Well, you talked about that podcast. Why don't you mention a podcast?" I was like, "Yeah, good idea. I'm going to tell him I have a podcast, and I'm going to ask him to be a guest on my show." And I did.
What
And
we
I
did
was
with
like,
you, Evan. This isn't real.
yeah, this is the first
Exactly.
one.
Julio's some guy we found on the street. Julio's the guy
Yeah.
we found on the street. That's why I wasn't here on time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fake it till you make it. Why not? So that's what I think has been a lot of, looking back at certain decisions I made or certain key inflection points for me. I think it's been taking action before I feel fully ready, even if I'm nervous or scared. It's pushing through that, noise or that chatter in your head to actually take action, because the worst they can say is no, or the worst that can happen is you're right back where you started. So
Yeah, I learned a lot. I used to be really timid, and then for some reason I was sick and tired of that way of living, and so I just started taking more chances and having more faith in things. And I realized if even if I fell flat in my face, I'd be okay. And so it was just much more exciting to live life, kind of taking more chances and going after things I actually like to do.
yeah, exactly.
So, but I don't know what kind of gets people to that point. It's just kind of like usually pain. Pain's the greatest motivator in life. So.
Right.
So tell us about your mastermind. Like, seems like you took your wife's kind of background and combined it with your interests, and now you were on the BiggerPockets podcast, which was like my first introduction to podcasts, and like I don't know. At one point, it was like I think one of the biggest podcasts in the world, and somehow you got on there, which is amazing. I'd like to hear about that experience, and then two, tell us about this mastermind that you run.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the two stories go together very well. So I had my podcast, which, as you all know, it's amazing networking tool. And I also consider that like my personal MBA, and also builds a platform and helps other people through your audience. And through that podcast, I had the opportunity to have Brandon Turner, who was the previous and was the current at the time host of the BiggerPockets podcast. And at the end of the podcast, he has no idea what I do, but at the end, he's like, "So what do you do?" I told him what I did. I was like, "We do affordable housing." He's like, "No way." He's like, "We haven't had anybody on the show that talked about that. So I'd love to have you on." I was like, "Yes, let's do that."
Dude, that's
And
huge.
3 weeks later, I'm on the podcast.
That's like
And
Oprah, like touting your book.
yeah, I mean, it was an amazing opportunity. Like before we were recording, like the talking, I asked him, I was like, "So how many people listen to your episodes?" They're like, "Oh, on average, like 500,000. I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's a pretty significant audience." And so leading up to this, with my podcast, I had people reaching out and saying, "Hey, Evan, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do real estate investing, but with impact and with service and with helping other people, and in a way to give back through my work. And where can I get started?" And I was like, "Well, there's not like a great like starter place that I felt like I could send people. I felt like a lot of the conferences were just too high level for people just trying to get started." And so eventually my wife, who was in the coaching industry, said, "Hey, why don't you create your own program, and you can share your knowledge and your expertise, and there's nobody else sharing this out there, at least from the developer operator side." And I was like, "You know what? Yeah, let's do that." And this was end of 2020. And we decided to pitch the program, and I mentioned it on the Bigger Pockets podcast. That's why I was like, "Oh shoot, they have 500,000. I'm going to mention this to 500,000 people." And we had no website. We had nothing built other than like a general outline of what it could look like what the modules could look like. It was like we had 16 lines on a piece of paper. That was it. And I mentioned that. And then I was like, "When are you guys going to air this?" They're like, "Oh, in like 2 weeks." I said, I went immediately to Jeanette, my wife. I was like, we need to build a landing page like today. And thankfully, she is so resourceful that we could do that. So 5 days later, we had a landing page. And a week later, we had 5,000 visitors on the website in the first week. And we had 300 people fill out the application, which is a lengthy application used. Like we tried to use it to weed out people that weren't serious. And we had 300 people fill it out, and we had 25 people join the program. It was a 12-month, really A to Z coaching program with 16 modules, 50 hours worth of video inside of us literally breaking down every aspect of deals and negotiations and partnerships and every aspect of affordable housing and getting your first deal done. And we did biweekly and monthly calls within that. And then we did an in-person 3-day mastermind retreat here in Nashville where we hosted them. They could see deals, they could all mastermind together, and we could figure out, what is the next step for their next deal. And from that, we had one lady get a $400,000 grant from Enterprise to start and launch her own business. We had multiple people complete multiple developments, affordable developments or mixed income developments. And so we've now decided we want to relaunch that. So we're relaunching that this spring, 2026, to basically expand and really with the bigger mission of our big, hairy, audacious goal is help solve the housing crisis. And I know that that's not going to be just Evan. That's not going to be just Holladay Ventures. That's going to take a big village of people that are all passionate and driven and impact minded. And so for us to be able to play a part in sharing that and sharing the knowledge and the tools and the resources to help other people do that is really part of our bigger mission. And really, I think what also gets me so fired up is seeing people taking, what's already in your head and being able to use that to make real change happen.
Now, speaking of change and impact, I read recently an article by Molly Davis in the Tennessean about Chris Proctor. Can you tell us about Chris Proctor and your relationship with him?
Yes, definitely. So he was going through recovery at Samaritan Recovery Community, which we had partnered with in a redevelopment of their campus. So this was one of the first Holladay Ventures developments we did, where we partnered with a nonprofit recovery center that owned a full city block in Nashville, but was basically turning people away because they did not have enough beds, and their facilities were outdated and really functionally obsolete. They needed to be torn down, and they were just constantly pumping more money into them. And so we came up with their board and us got connected, and we figured out a creative way to say, hey, let's expand
You like
SRC.
go after, did you see this and say, wow, they really need some help here? They need like a developer, like they're a nonprofit that probably doesn't know development. So they need some development help.
Yeah, what's funny is they're right near the Housing Authority headquarters in Nashville. So I had driven by it. I'd always just assumed it was part of the Housing Authority. And we got connected through a mutual connection in the development world, a market rate developer. And they wanted to be helpful for this nonprofit. They got connected to the board originally, but they knew they're like, this doesn't feel like it should be a market rate. It should be affordable, but we don't know affordable. So that's when we're like, let's talk to Evan and let's all figure this out. So we came together. It was Holladay Ventures, Evergreen Real Estate, and Samaritan Recovery Community. And the three of us really brainstormed, how do we figure out how to keep SRC in operation, expand their facilities, build them a new building, with no commitment from them, no financial commitment from them, and be able to leverage local, state, and federal funding tools to build them a new building and 195 affordable uh, units of housing from 30 to 80% AMI. That was phase one. We're now working on phase two, where their old building used to be. We moved them into the new building. We tore down their old building. We're now building phase two, which is another 289 units. That'll be completed later this year. And so where Chris comes into this story is and I don't know Chris personally, but Chris was going through hard times, his dad passing away, and he was in need of recovery. He was in need of help, and he knew he'd hit rock bottom. And so he reached out and got connected to SRC. He got into their recovery program, and they help all kinds of recovery. They specialize in people that really have no way of paying for it. And so they helped him go through intensive rehab and then through transitional living. And then once he was ready to live fully on his own, he moved into the most deeply affordable units at a Shelby house. So right next door, so he could still go back to his community and his support network right there and he was able to get a job at a local food bank. So now he's working as a forklift operator at a local food bank, and he's now actually since moved on out of Shelby House into his own house, or into his own place. But it just amazing to hear like stories like that. And I talk to Mark, the executive director there, all the time, and I've since joined the board of SRC. But just to hear the level of impact and the level of how they can help people literally save lives, it's mind blowing. Like I've never had that level of impact, or have seen that level of impact directly until I've heard the stories from Mark. But it's truly impactful, the work they're doing. To be able to provide recovery and affordable housing together right there on the same block and the same development has been really just, I think, a game changer for the residents and those going through recovery, but also hopefully a model going forward.
Yeah, love that. You mentioned prior to us recording this, it was kind of harder to get deals done. I've noticed that myself with a lot of our clients. What do you see going on in the Holladay Ventures world? Growth plans? Are you going to stay in Nashville? Yeah, just give us a kind of an overview of the next couple of years. You think?
Yeah,
Seem like a guy that plans.
Yes.
maybe a few, maybe a few. No, really, what we're focused on is, to this point, we've found great success and traction here in Nashville. We've developed over 1,200 units in the last 6 years and done it in a really unique and impactful way. And we want to now figure out how do we scale this model and make it replicatable in other markets, in other cities, and other communities that want to have that level of impact through affordable housing. And so we're actively working on a development in Columbus now. And we're looking throughout the Carolinas and Georgia as well for new opportunities and really new partners that can play a role in that, and also new team members. We're actively expanding our team and our partners.
Are you partnering with other like Samaritan Heights type places? Like we just did I just recorded a faith-based affordable housing webinar today. It's coming out on Monday, and yeah, it was with David Bowers from Enterprise, and they had a pastor on
Hmm.
down in Georgia. And like, it seems there's a ton of opportunity there. I was at a conference in LA a couple weeks ago, talking about doing a development with actually a community college, which I thought was fascinating. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of these partnerships going or trying to go on. Is that what you're kind of targeting?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're in active discussions with or partnership with multiple different nonprofit organizations just like that, same situation as SRC, sitting on great real estate, have a great mission, a great track record of helping their clients, but they don't know where to go from here in terms of redeveloping and looking at the 50 to 100-year picture of how is their nonprofit going to last financially sustainably, and also how is their space going to help best serve them in their growth. So we've been playing a role in helping really tap into that value for our nonprofit partners while also creating affordable housing and new revenue streams for the nonprofit. So we are actively looking for opportunities where nonprofits are open to or want to figure that out. And that can also be faith-based organizations like you mentioned. We're in talks with a few of groups like that as well. And so just trying to figure out, like, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned community college. Like, there's so many groups out there now that are like, wait a second, we have land, we have an asset, and it was sitting right under our nose this whole time. And now they realize, like, wait a second, we can take this asset that we own and we can do good with it. And I think that's been really fun and exciting to see this momentum. Having been in affordable housing for 12 years now, like, see that kind of momentum building. That's on the land side. And then I think also on the funding side. And we talked briefly earlier about, like, there's a lot of headwinds in terms of public funding, and also even some previously relied on funding sources that may or may not be available going forward. And so we've had to pivot. And this is not unlike any other turns of cycles of the greater economy, but I think what will separate a lot of groups going forward is who can get really creative on, one, sourcing the land or the deal or the partnership, like you mentioned earlier, but also the financing side, like who can get creative with finding foundations or grants or donor advised funds, or other unique creative ways that are not your typical funding source in your capital stack. Is not like a home fund or CDBG fund. It's more of that, like, private capital that is mission driven, that wants to do good, but doesn't, maybe didn't know how to get involved previously.
Well, Evan, you do a lot of great impact, positive impact on your community, it sounds like. Unfortunately, we're about to have a negative impact on you because you just sat on the hot seat.
Down.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Start you easy. We'll start you easy.
An easy one.
So, any good book or podcast recommendations? Obviously, you've been on a few. So, what are you reading?
Uh, I'm reading lately. I always read one nonfiction and one fiction. Foundation is my fiction. It's like a 1960s sci-fi. Yeah, and there was a TV show.
The show is like I'm not having a hard time following.
Yeah, the book is really good. I enjoyed it.
Smart guy.
And then what is the name? There's Building Optimism is the book I just started. That is a lot about our built environment and why it is the way it is currently and how can we change it going forward.
Huh. All right. Well, you see, you're also a busy guy. I mean, you're doing a lot of things. Do you have any sort of routine or something that I kind of got this from, what was that guy? He had the morning something. He had like a morning routine guy. He was part of that whole
Miracle Morning?
Miracle Morning. Right. So I did that for a while and that was intense. And I think after a while he recommended people don't do that. But I did that for a couple of years and it was it was intense. But do you have any sort of routines? Like I do a lot of prayer, meditation, exercise, stuff like that. Anything that kind of keeps you grounded and remember like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I would say two things really help me. I don't do it every day. I think that's important to share with people because everybody's like, you got to have this perfect morning routine. It's not perfect for me, but I do meditation and then I also do gratitude. So whenever I do that, I feel like my day is 10 times better.
Yeah. The more you practice gratitude, the more you are grateful. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You can direct your day a little bit if you start out positive and you kind of stay positive. So, next question is, would love to know a little bit about how you go about doing your hiring. It's actually interesting when you think about like a mission-driven organization, because I assume that you're not leading with compensation. How do you staff your project
Yeah, great question. I think
other
it's
than marrying the people?
yeah. Finding them on dating apps. That's the answer.
For now.
Yeah. Um, no, I think for us, it's been, and same thing as I said before, we're not perfect. Like we're always learning. But I think what has worked for us is putting out there, like you mentioned, social media and LinkedIn. Like a big reason why I do that is because I feel like the more you put yourself out there, the more people that are aligned with what you're saying will find you and will reach out to you. And I get people reaching out all the time through LinkedIn or Instagram or different platforms or really just cold emails and saying, "Hey, I'd love the opportunity to, work for you or intern with you." I'd say 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work out, but occasionally we can find and attract the right people. And then I think too, our goal is to one, I learned this from Ray Dalio's Principles book, Always Pay North of Fair. And I think that was a big lesson I learned in my own experience as being an employee. And I want to make sure that our people always feel like one, they're heard, one, and two, they're taken care of, and three, they're part of something bigger than themselves. And that's really why our mission is so important because I think that'll help us attract the best people to really helping solve the housing crisis. And I think it's working with recruiters, it's doing, direct messages ourselves, it's doing job postings, it's really like using every angle we can because there's so many amazing people out there, but it's hard to find the right ones that match your core values and two match your team's needs. So finding those right candidates, finding those A players is so valuable.
Yep. Last question. I think you've mentioned a few people already, but what mentors have had the most impact on you?
That's a good question. I would say the first ones that come to mind are one, my mom. My mom was really impactful. Both my parents, really, my mom and my dad. But my mom had this entrepreneurial spirit. She started so many different businesses and nonprofits, and she started the Cincinnati Film Commission, brought all kinds of films to Cincinnati for economic development. Like Rain Man was filmed there. Um,
Nice.
she, I think, showed me that anything is possible, and also that you can help people through your work. And also, she passed away at a young age. She passed away when I was 24. And really, her funeral showed me that one, we only have a limited amount of time on this earth, and two, that you should spend it with your family and helping others.
Wow. That's a great one. It's almost like you knew the question, but you didn't. You just come up with it. That's awesome. That was a great. You're very eloquent. It's a touching story. So yeah, I
Appreciate it.
appreciate you. I mean, Lisa and I are going to be in a ULI in Nashville. I'm on the Affordable Council. I know I reached out to you. I know someone else did too on there to try to get you to be on some panels and stuff. So if I don't see you before then or talk to you before then, I hope to see you then.
Yes, yeah, we'd love to see everybody in Nashville. I think we may be doing a tour of one of our properties. We'll see, but it'll be fun.
I'm sure you are.
Oh,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Evan.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.